right. Welcome, everyone. This is our third installment of Book Conversations. We don't actually have a title for this series. If we do, I don't know what it is, and I haven't committed it to memory, but we'll figure it out. For those of you new to this series, I'm Steve Carpenter, the Michael J. and Aimee Rusinko Kakos Dean in the College of Arts and Architecture, and I have the pleasure of sitting down with recent authors and editors of books from the College of Arts and Architecture to learn a bit more about not only the book, but about the author or the editor. And this is our third installment. So with us is Professor Frank Jacobus, Department Head of the Department of Architecture in the College of Arts and Architecture. I have some questions I'd like to ask Frank. This becomes a dialogue, and it's a little more fluid than a predetermined set of questions might suggest. At a certain point, we'll turn it over to the audience to ask questions as well. But to get started, I thought we'd engage in some conversation. I've shared with you some questions. Mm-hmm. I haven't shared with you all the questions.
Oh, okay.
You have some of the answers. We'll see if you have all of the answers, is how this works. So the book that we're discussing, we don't actually have a physical copy here. Neither of us brought our copies.
Picture it's a square about that big. It's about that thick. It's got an AI image on the cover.
It has an AI image on the cover. The book title is Artificial Intelligent Architecture, New Paradigms in Architectural Practice and Production. And you've co-edited this with Brian Kelly.
That's right.
How did you meet Brian?
I met Brian through social media originally, I think, and then we met at conferences over the years, and so got to know each other. And then through social media, I saw that he was producing work with AI, and I started talking to him about it. This may be one of your next questions, but anyway, I started talking to him about this, and a project emerged, which I can talk about if that comes up. So,
okay, well, tell us about the project.
Well, so, you know, I knew Brian, I knew the work he was doing, but through social media, I saw all the other work going on with AI, especially through the visualization platforms. Like I saw my colleagues around the world really doing production with this tool, a fairly new tool. At the time, it was maybe 3-4 months that visualization that we think of in AI now started happening through Midjourney, which I'll just call MJ. And so I reached out to him and I said, there's a lot of people working on this. There's a lot of newness here. We've got to do something. And not only do we have to do something, we have to do something quick because the way these tools are changing, it was version 3 maybe at the time, moving into version 4. And so how can we get something done quick, involve colleagues that we know that are working on these tools, and convince them to produce work within like a month and a half, 2 months, something like that, which is academically not typical, right?
Not at all.
And so, and then try to get it published as quickly as possible, because we were worried that through any kind of peer review, which this book does not have, we would be in a situation where 2 years out, we would have a book, and AI would be totally different by the time we produced the book. So we just pushed hard and, talked to a bunch of like-minded people and got a group together.
So remind me of the timeline. How many years back did you have that first conversation with Brian? We're in 2024 now, so...
Yeah, thanks for reminding me about that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's, it was, I think, 2022, most likely, maybe late 22. And that conversation, probably around Christmas time we had a conversation about doing this, and literally 3 months later, we had the authors, the chapters, the edits. It took the publisher 6 or 9 months. We had talked to them, and we were hoping that this would be turned around in 3 or 4 months, publishing-wise. But our work took a lot less time than their work did.
That's because you used AI to generate the content.
They may some of the authors may have. I actually didn't ask whether they did or not, but that may be true. But I do think it's a fascinating moment where, you start to wonder about book as a way of disseminating information when some of these things are changing so fast that the book is I love books, but it starts to be questionable as a way of getting that information out there.
Sure. So this is going to be the most difficult and the easiest question I'm going to ask you. What is AI?
It's absolutely the most difficult question. I mean, AI is a lot of things. I mean, AI, for instance, the AI in this book is a very specific brand or type, right? The tool itself is using a litany of images gathered and finding sort of commonalities and formal and spatial commonalities in the images to generate new work. You know, large language models are generating what we would call AI in a different way. So, you know, some people that you talk to about AI would say, this particular aspect's not AI, call this generative design. But AI, I think about it as taking what we do as human beings and using digital tools to sort of exaggerate that, exaggerate our abilities. And so in terms of this book is all visual AI, so it's the use of tools to take visual things in the world and exaggerate them at an accelerated pace. That's how I would define it.
And so when you say the book is all visual AI, really it's the focus of the book is on the generation of visual AI, because there's text in the book, right? So I don't want folks to think the book is only images. It's images that have text. There are interviews in the book, but then there's also more conventionally suggested chapters in the generated chapters in the book. So when you say it's focused on visual AI, you're talking about it's about the creation of visual imagery.
We were interested in the idea of the visual AI tools versus the large language model like ChatGPT. We did use ChatGPT. One of the interesting things I think in the book, I hope there's a lot of interesting things, but one of the interesting things in the book is there's a gentleman named Andrew Cudless who does a lot of work. He's well known in our discipline. And we asked him a series of questions as to how he thinks artificial intelligence will evolve over the 5-10 years, whatever this time period is that we want to talk about. And then we used ChatGPT and asked it the same exact questions. And the front of the book is Andrew answering those questions, and the back of the book is ChatGPT answering those questions. And it was fascinating to see the similarities. I don't know if Andrew is like a robot or if ChatGPT is like Andrew. Right. I don't know, but there's a great similarity in their answers. By the way, I don't know. I don't actually pretend to be an expert in a lot of this, and that's, I think, one of the things that gets talked about in the book is one of the things we need to discuss is that the tools themselves are a kind of democratizing agent. And I think for our disciplines, that's going to be something to ask questions about and contend with, because now people are generating this imagery who don't necessarily have an expertise in making images, but basically these tools give over that expertise to others. And so I keep asking questions, and in this conference that Malik and I were at recently, I was asking, probably irritating everybody by asking them these questions, but you know, I asked the question, is there such thing as expertise? Like, I went around saying, is there such thing as good to certain people? And I could tell by the look on their face, they didn't want me to ask them that question.
Yeah, I don't want you to ask me that question either.
And I said, but basically, like, if we were to say, there is good sensibility, or there's refined sensibility, we could have an argument about whether that's true or whether that's false, but these tools are going to open the door, or have opened the door, for people to produce work in the world who aren't necessarily trained to produce that work. So if we're graphic designers being trained to make graphical things, or architects trained in the visual field, now the world is open to people who are not necessarily trained in these ways to make these images. And so I think one of the questions that we'll start to ask is, where's goodness? How do we judge? How do we discern what's a good image versus what's not a good image? And so Brian and I both say this. We're not like tool producers. We don't produce artificial intelligence tools, but we're tool users, and we're interested in how that tool is changing the nature of what we do.
Could we think of AI as an advisor?
I certainly do. Yeah.
Could they be could AI be considered a consultant?
I think of it that way.
So would AI have expertise that you're saying that the users of those tools don't have, but AI has that expertise?
Yeah, I think that's, one could say AI could have expertise. I think the challenge is, if we're using this tool, how do I know whether it has whether what it's giving me at that moment is expertise, or whether it's giving me falsehoods.
So this seems, Frank, what you just said seems to me to be something that runs through students' minds when they're in a critique and they're listening to some faculty members. Am I hearing a bunch of falsehoods, or is there some expertise behind it? No, in all seriousness, could AI function as another agent within a critique or a charrette?
Yeah, I mean, I actually use not only the visual AI tools, but text-based tools all the time. I use them. I probably would not admit to you all the ways that I use them, but it's absolutely an advisor. It's absolutely a kind of I think it's a companion. But it's got all the problems of, like, when the people you grow up closest to are the influencers in your life, right? Like the people that you choose to hang around are a large predictor of the kinds of successes or failures you might see in the world. This is maybe what we're going to experience with AI tools. Yes, it's going to be an advisor. Yes, it's going to be a help. Yes, it's going to be used in ways that you think are helping, but it's hurting. Yeah. I mean, in some ways, this may be too broad a statement, but any troubles that our intelligence gets us into, artificial intelligence is going to get us into, but probably at an exaggerated pace. Like Sam Altman says, imagine how do you imagine the future of AI? Well, just imagine what you do now, just 10,000 times faster.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, what does that mean? Even if we say 100 times faster, well, you can get in trouble 100 times faster. That's fast, because you can get in trouble pretty fast.
That's right.
So, so it's going to be all those things.
So when you say exaggerated, you mean accelerated time?
Yeah.
Not so much exaggerated as in magnitude? That's what you mean by exaggerated. You mean by
things are going to
time.
Like if it took you
temporal.
Let's pretend that we trusted AI to produce written work right now. We went through an age where Wikipedia was not a trusted reference, right? And then they found out that this is more accurate than the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Right.
So we've gone through this 10-year cycle of nobody, even in my career, nobody trusted Wikipedia. Now it's more trusted than a lot of other sources. So it's going to be, if we trust it to write, we're not in that era yet. I don't think we're in that era yet. I don't think we've contended with this yet. But let's say we did. Well, then you can write a book. Instead of it taking you 2 years, it'll take you 2 months. And so instead of producing 5 books in your life, you produce 50.
Right.
And so, what happens when that paradigm shift occurs? What happens, and how do we know what to trust at some point? And so I think that's going to be a big question that comes up while using these tools. I mean, I think there's a lot of other questions too, because the speed at which, I'm sure somebody here would argue that the pace at which you work determines a lot of the kind of substance of the work itself. If I produce something in 10 minutes and I produce something in 10 hours, I think the world we live in now, the way our minds work now, the 10-hour thing is likely to have more depth. And but that may not be the case when we start pushing and moving with these tools. And not to get on a soapbox or to kind of, I say this in my chapter of the book, to me there are some assets to this. There are probably a lot of liabilities to this as well, but the assets to this to me are, I think we get in our own ways a lot as creators. People who create a lot in here, your self-consciousness can be your worst enemy in creativity, right? You're always thinking of, why would I do it this way? Why should I do it this way? has this been done before? Has that been done before? When I've used the AI visualization tools, it is so quick that it subverts your self-consciousness. You just go. You're like a DJ moving through this thing. I think that's a great asset of this tool, of the MJ Midjourney and the other visualization tools. But there's other liabilities. I mean, a litany of images. How do you contend with so many images that are going to be in this world? Are images going to become less valuable? What's going to constitute value in an image? I mean, I think there's just a whole host of things that are not good. But what's good is it's going to give you a partner that helps you subvert your own self-consciousness as a creator. And that, to me, is a very powerful tool, because the last thing I'll say, I promise, because I've been talking for a long time, but our intellect as designers often gets in the way of our intuition. And we don't necessarily privilege, in academia especially, we privilege the intellect so much. But the intuition's way more powerful. And my experience with the AI tools is, man, you're just intuiting, you're just reacting, you're seeing it, and you're trusting yourself, and you're moving. And to that extent, it's really powerful. So,
I'd like to talk a bit more about the intellect, the intuitive, the exaggerated intuitive development of intuition. I would imagine is part of it. But I'm stuck on this idea of, we've engaged in a few questions here, but most of your responses are actually questions.
that's my life.
This is your life. Well, what I'm getting at is I've read there haven't been reviews, but you go online, you can read what Amazon and other places suggest your book is about.
Okay.
Right? And this book will include speculations on the introduction of artificial intelligence bots, apps into architecture and feature speculations, interrogations. The authors put forth a position, like, you're not necessarily coming to conclusions, right? That's something that struck me about the book, is you're not making definitive statements.
Right.
You're actually opening up possibilities.
Yeah.
How does this notion of speculation play into the intuitive?
Oh God, that's a good question, but a tough one. Let me start by just responding to.
They get harder.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, to start, the intent of the book, if I didn't say so, I probably didn't say so at the beginning, is a snapshot in time of this tool. So there weren't going to be conclusions or firm conclusions.
And that snapshot was just about 50 or 60 months ago.
Yeah, it wasn't, or
less.
24 maybe, or 20 or something. Yeah, it was a snapshot, almost like if you think of if you had a Polaroid.
Oh right, yeah, 20 to 30 months ago.
Yeah, if you had a Polaroid, you got to see how, or a gelatin print or something. You get to see how these things evolve. We wanted this to be the gelatin print.
Got it.
We wanted it to be the thing that you put out there quick. People are speculating. They've only used it for, some of these authors probably only used it for 3 months before they speculated. So are they experts? Well, they were as expert as anybody at this tool at the time, but they had only used it for 3 months. And so we wouldn't normally consider that expertise. And we took a risk, by the way, of looking silly. Like here's what we think might happen with AI, and then 10 years from now, Frank, none of this happened.
Right, exactly.
Like you guys are fools about what you're saying. But that's part of what we want to do, is just put ourselves out there, talk about what's happening there. But yeah, there's no conclusions really, because we know this thing is changing very, very rapidly. And so I can certainly speculate on ways that I think the tool will be used and evolve. But I mean, truly, like, I sent you the Sara stuff, so I sent Steve the
great stuff.
Video AI that's coming out pretty. It's already established, but not out to the public, at least from last. Again, it could be out today or something. I don't know, but it's amazing what they're going to do with video. We're going to move into 3D with these tools. We're going to be able to take point clouds from them. Some of these already do, like DALL-E already does small versions of this. I mean, it's just where these will go is pretty spectacular. And so the book is like, let's just, now that we're using this, what questions does that provoke about where this might go? And so that's why you're going to probably hear more speculation and question and wonder. And really, I've said this to you, I think, but I'm not an AI pounder of the drum.
Right.
I'm just determined not to be scared of it and just to ask questions about it and to use it as I ask questions about it.
Right.
But if somebody were to walk up to me and say, "This is going to mean the destruction of what we do," I'd say that could be.
Yeah, it's possible.
It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not running from it.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to try these things, and we have a chance to be contributors to how it might evolve too, and that's important to be able to drive that forward in a positive way as much as possible.
Sure. Yeah, that's one of the things I like about the book is that you don't chime the crisis bell.
Yeah.
Right. The book's not about beware, beware. It's it's about poking and questioning and imagining. That to me, the notion of intuition, right? When we're just, it's a kind of a natural reflex. Well, to be curious, to try this out. Well, that didn't work, and put this up here. That fell down. Well, why?
Yeah.
It's about there's ideation, but it's the process of ideation that I think the book really wants us to think about more than the product. Is that fair?
That's absolutely fair. And the comments I've gotten, so I have a group of people like these people in this book who are AI users, and they're very positive about the things that it can do. And I think people who have used something like Midjourney a lot, I think they would tell you there's a kind of magic in it that's pretty amazing. I have another group of people in my life, just like we all do, like at Thanksgiving table, you got multiple political sides or whatever, who absolutely hate this. My brother's one of them, actually. He's a painter, and he hates these tools, and he's very worried about what they're going to do. And he's a little bit more closed to it than I am in terms of, like, he hates it, and therefore don't touch these things, don't use these things. And I'm not there yet. I'm just I do think it opens up all, you mentioned the word intuition, I mentioned it earlier. I do think it opens up massive discussions that we really aren't having that much. Like I don't think we went around talking about the nature of intelligence that much in our discipline. Like now we are. We're talking about the nature of artificial intelligence, but we weren't talking about the nature of intelligence that much. I didn't go to a lot of students' desks and say, what is intelligence? What's human intelligence? And how does it evolve? But now we're talking about it, artificial intelligence, and we want to know what it means and what, but I think we also discount, like I said earlier, intuition to a certain extent, like at least historically. I'm not sure if this is the case in 2024, but a student comes to us and delivers something, and you ask them, what is the intention behind this? And they say, it just feels right. In architecture, this is, at least historically, not the right answer.
Okay.
Let
me make note of that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, on one hand, as a teacher, you want to help train a student to understand how they're going to talk about something. And so it's important to say, it can't just be a thing that feels right. We have to explain why it feels right, right? But ultimately, what we do, as intellectual as we try to make it, as reasoned as we try to make it, is because it feels right. That's why we do what we do. We can pretend that we've come up with a reason for it, and we often have reasons for things, but ultimately we make that final decision because it just feels right. Because ultimately there's 1,000 things to decide.
Right.
So how do you can't juggle all that. So you're trusting your intuition. But again, how do you said the word earlier, training intuition, which I love. We have to train intuition. How do you, but Ben Shahn says this, how do you train intuition? By prolonged tuition. You have to be engaged in a kind of study, and then eventually, if you're engaged and if you work hard enough, eventually it's just going to flow. Yeah. You're gonna have it. But, and I was at a conference asking the same question, like I said earlier, but what's flowing? If there's no North Star of rightness or goodness, what are we flowing towards, And so I think that's going to come up a lot, because you're going to have tens of thousands of images, and then somebody like me, old guy, is going to say, that's not a good image. Yeah. And then some young person is going to say, you don't have the right to judge what good is. And that's part of the discussion that we're going to have moving forward, and ceramics, how do you make a decision on what that thing is? And it's partly you're feeling it with your hands, you're intuiting it, you're coming out of a tradition, you're doing all those things. And I still believe in those traditions, but I'm not sure that those traditions will persist as much with the radicalization of these devices. Because if I don't have any training and I can make an image that is good enough for somebody, why do I need your information or my information or anybody else's information to move forward? But so I think there's just big questions that we're going to have coming forward about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I would imagine all of that information just becomes part of the database or the knowledge base, I guess, that the artificial intelligence reaches into to generate new ideas. So where do these images come from?
Where do the tools images come from?
The images that the AI tools draw from, or do the AI tools generate the new images by themselves?
Oh God, that's going to be dependent on how you do.
See, I told you the questions get harder.
Yeah,
I told you.
Depending on what the word "is" means, or something like that.
Now, let's not go there.
Yeah,
That's not what I'm talking about.
The images come, depending on the tool, I think, the images come from many different places. They might come from photo collector sites, stock photo sites. And I don't know that Midjourney, I think Midjourneys come from stock photo sites rather than, they've said they don't cull them from the internet, but some of these use the internet to cull images. So they come from the world. They come from the world of images. It depends on the tool that you're using, I think, to say specifically. And then also, I think, and I'm not expert on this, but I think if like Sam Altman were, or like, any leader of one of these industries, I'm not sure they're going to tell you exactly where they got their images too. I think that's going to be a little bit of a secret. They're going to tell you something, but it may not be the entire truth. But so yeah, they come from the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, gosh, there's so many directions I want to go with these questions. So let me just share with you. I've played around a little bit with visual AI, right? And so one of the ways we do this is you type in some text into a space and you hit go or send or enter or click and images appear magically, right?
Yeah.
So Adobe Express has this generation tool, right? So I decided to try it out. I like causing trouble. I like trying out new tools. Right?
Yeah.
So it's going to date me, but it's okay. And it's going to reveal some personal information, but it's okay. So I used to play soccer. And the first time I played organized soccer was when I was in junior high school. I didn't go to middle school. I went to junior high school, so that tells you how old I am. And I played at Ridgeview Junior High School in Gaithersburg, Maryland in 1978. And I did a bicycle kick. This is a kick where you essentially jump in the air with one foot and the other foot kicks the ball over your head, and it's supposed to go over your shoulder, and it goes into the upper 90, and everybody cheers, and it's brilliant, brilliant victory, right? So I tried it and kicked myself in the face with the ball. Didn't score the goal.
Oh
didn't
no,
win.
I was going to say at least maybe if you scored off
No,
your
it just
face
bounced off, right? So I decided, okay, Adobe Express, Steve Carpenter, Ridgeview Junior High School, playing bicycle kick soccer game, 1978. And the images it produced were not me. They didn't look like me.
Yeah.
They didn't look like any Steve Carpenter I'd met at all. Any Steve Carpenter at Ridgeview Junior High School in Gaithersburg, Maryland in the 1970s that I knew of. None of these, as a matter of fact, they look like nobody in my family.
Yeah.
Right? And we have a range of tonalities in my family.
Yeah.
Right? So I thought this was odd, and I kept hitting refresh. And after about 12 or 15 cycles, and none of these people looked like, they looked more like folks in Downton Abbey than they did looking like me. Okay? So I added a couple of words just to see what kind of images I would get. And I added Harlem, New York. And there were people of color finally.
Mm-hmm.
So where's the intelligence in the artificial intelligence? Where are the worlds of images that these tools are drawing from? And what you talked about, there might be some problematic elements to this.
Mm-hmm.
What challenges and cautions do we need to think about? We're drawing from some databases and worlds, but not a range of worlds.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, no doubt. There's problems there, and I would say that eerily is similar to our own intelligence, right? Like it's similar to ignorance, because you have people, human beings, who are in certain cultures or societies who haven't been exposed to certain things, and if they hear, "Hey, Steve Carpenter did a bicycle kick," they're going to imagine some white British dude or something doing a bicycle kick. You know what I mean? And that's going to come from their own lack of experience, and I think. These tools in defense of them, and I'm not here to defend. I'm certainly not making the money that all these people are making with these tools, but they do need time to learn and grow and change. And there was a study, I think I was talking to Denise Costanzo about this, a study or effort that Google, I think it was, that made to try to diversify the results of these tools a bit. And then it worked its algorithm over time, over diversification. Well, because like somebody would type in, I don't know why they'd be typing this in, but Nazi party standing in salute or something like that, and there'd be African Americans and and so it's like, wait a second, this is not. They probably weren't part of the Nazi party, but and so like I think those things are going to pop up. We're sort of in an awkward stage, and one of the ways I describe this I have a very good relationship with my brother, just so you know, so the contentiousness that I describe with him is all for the good. But he was complaining about these music apps that would try to find music to your taste as you listen to it. Oh, this is awful. It never finds anything to my taste. It never does anything. And I said, what you're doing is, and forgive the somewhat gross analogy that I'm about to make, is a baby is just born, and you put it hopefully on a table, not on the ground, but you put it on the table, and you're like, this is useless. It doesn't speak, it doesn't walk, it has no dexterity, it's got nothing, So I think these tools, this is kind of a scary part, by the way. Think about how powerful, those of you who've used these tools in here, think about how powerful they are, and they're newborn babies.
Yeah.
And so that should tell you how powerful they're going to be, because they will become better. And these issues that you bring up, which are serious issues, these companies will contend with these issues, and they are going to drive this forward in some way. And that's another reason why we should be a part of the conversation, because they can drive them forward in any number of ways. And but ultimately, the way we kind of communicate our fears and our desires for these tools are going to help them drive these forward, hopefully in a positive way.
Yeah. What do you think was your biggest pleasure in writing this book or editing the book?
Just to see all the ideas. Again, these people only use the tool for 3 to 6 months maybe, and such diversity of ideas. From what the tool can do, like the exaggerated effects that the tool provides, to how we break the tool. Like there are people writing literally about, let's be the adjutant, let's break the tool. How do we do this? Like using the tool in such strange ways, or for such, making forms that are just in the most grotesque, like just bug-like grotesqueness, to people like me who are like, I guess I like candy and colorful things, although as we talked about, I wear a lot of black, but fruit chairs.
That's why I wore a light shirt, so people could tell us apart.
But I like the playfulness of the tool, and my chapter is called Polymorphous Play. Like I like the idea that I think it's Alan Watts that says we need to take on this character of sinceriousness. Like if you see a child at play, they're so into their play. They're so, and they're playing, but they're serious. There's a seriousness to that. And so I talk about that in my chapter, where that the tool really does let us get in that space of like, I'm making fruit chairs, like who cares, but it's also just amazing the new forms that can come up immediately by using these tools.
So this idea of forms coming up immediately, this wasn't the segue I was thinking about, but until you said it. So you and Brian Kelly sent out this call for proposals, or you tagged folks that you know are interested in AI. You didn't necessarily have a structure for the book, right? And so when these chapters came in, you said, okay, these kind of work together in this way, and these work in this section. So it was almost like an emergent thematic construction of the organization of the book. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I'm having a hard time remembering. There was like maybe a very loose structure, which I can't even remember what the structure was. But yes, when the work came in, we began to typologize. It became evident that there were types. And if the next question is what are the types, I don't know the answer to that. So
I will not ask that question.
Okay, because I've forgotten. Like if we had the book here, I could just look it up and figure it out. But yeah, types emerge as they do, and so we sort of categorize. I think there's 3 main parts or something that we've categorized as type. But like one could do with any type, we could have retypologized in different ways too. But we chose to pursue that.
Yeah, and
that
that's what
particular
curators
path.
do, right? They take a set,
Yeah.
group of works of art and they rearrange them and create themes.
Yeah.
So, but what I'm also fascinated with is that you and Brian write this introduction. I mean, you have the sense of the book. You each have a chapter in the book, right? How did you did you write your chapter before you knew what the types would be, or did you see how things emerge and decide, okay, this is a weak section, I better write something that fits here?
Yeah, I shouldn't admit this to my dean.
Well, he's not going to listen to
because sometimes I can be a procrastinator. Sometimes. I haven't, and so luckily, I could just fit my chapter in. Luckily, I didn't have my chapter done in time, so I could just say, oh, there's a little need there. So I would just put my chapter in a need. I could have written about something else, but I chose to do that because there was a little bit of a need. We knew what Brian's interest in large part at that time was about copyright issues, and so we kind of knew where he was going to be with that. And but he I think if I remember correctly, he had an alternative too, because there's this whole discussion of prompt crafting, and so he wants to he was interested in that as well. And I have, if you wanted to ask me about that, I have definite opinions on prompt crafting, but prompt crafting is like, if you in an image generation software, if you're trying to make, let's say, a beautiful image, which again, we're in a strange era where that word doesn't necessarily mean anything. It does to me, but it doesn't mean anything to a lot of other people. But if you want to make a beautiful image, how do you craft the words in the perfect way to get the image that you're trying to get? And my opinion, since you actually didn't ask, but I'll say it anyway, but my opinion on prompt craft is it's mostly garbage. The way you get beautiful images is to relentlessly work on getting a beautiful image. You just spend hours and hours and hours and hours. You don't just write a beautiful prompt. I could get a beautiful image with ugly prompts iterated 10,000 times, so you can try to write a beautiful prompt, and I've worked on prompt crafting myself, and not myself, but prompt crafting, and it often fails. It doesn't get you necessarily what you want. What you have to do is see what is emerging and select. It's Darwinism. You see what's emerging and you select from that emergence. That's the way to get good work out of a tool like Visual AI. Well, now, somebody else might be some other prompt crafter out there might have just so much to say about that, but I would love to have I'd love to have a prompt craft battle with them, because I think people want to be prompt crafters. I think they want desperately for that craft to exist, and so they're making it up. And I don't think it actually exists.
This might have to be a topic for another discussion, right? I mean, I can see it opening, because as you were talking about prompt crafting and defining it for us, I'm just thinking of a painter with multiple brushstrokes trying to get it right. So isn't each brushstroke not a prompt craft?
Yeah, I think the brushstroke is the example of what I'm talking about, which is the painter lays that stroke on the canvas, and at some point pulls away, and intuitively, again,
there's your word,
says that's the way. If you ask the painter, and I'm generalizing big time here, but if you ask the painter, why is that the way? I would think most painters would say, it's just the way. If the painter's not, I'm not saying that painters aren't very smart, but the painter is not the intellect. The painter is the painter. They make beautiful paintings. And yes, in academia, we ask them to rationalize what they've done, But the painting is not a rational process, step by step. I would assume ceramics is the same way.
I don't know. It sounds like you're throwing the gauntlet down. We're gonna have to go at. No, what I'm saying is, I mean, this is an interesting conversation to have, right? And I would certainly love to have some painters and some ceramic artists and some digital prompt crafters. Have a chat. Listen, I want to get to one other question. Transition to these 5 essential questions I want to ask you, and then we'll open it up to the studio audience. How's that?
Good. Is this an easy or hard question? This.
Yes. So, if there's a big lesson that this book teaches, or a big lesson that readers might walk away from, what would that be?
I hope they walk away with a lot of different lessons, because the whole point of the book is that many authors are coming together and having different views on what's happening. I hope, I mean, this may be skirting your question a little bit, but I think a big lesson that I would love people to take from it is that you have to engage. Like, you can't just play the role of negative standoffishness from these kinds of tools. I think you have to engage, and the minute somebody's engaged in the tool, I'm the first person who's open to their warnings and you know what I mean. I want to have those discussions of what might go wrong here, but I don't necessarily want to have them too often with people who haven't actually used the tools, because I don't know that they. You know, I've heard from my architecture, not necessarily at Penn State, but architecture colleagues saying, the design process is ruined by using these tools. These tools subvert design process. I can tell when somebody's talking whether they've actually used the tool. I can tell by what they're saying whether they've actually used the tool, and it changes our design process. These tools do, but I would say it doesn't destroy design process as a thing. It may destroy certain types of design process, but and so anyway, I just hope that people would take from the book, like, these people put themselves out there. They're producing work that 10 years from now might be shown to be silly, and that's what we do. We continue to put ourselves out there, and you know, that's what I hope people take from it.
Nice. It's about the construction of new knowledge, and like you said, as a snapshot, this is where we are now, and it's
a conversation.
We build. It's a conversation. Speculative. It's generative, and with any luck, it becomes formative for future possibilities. All right, Frank. I have five questions that I want to ask you, and then we'll move to the studio audience. What is your favorite word?
I saw this one earlier. I don't have a favorite word, but I have to answer you, so I'm going to answer you. Can you guess what it is?
It's been used. Intuitive.
Yeah.
Intuition.
I'm going to choose intuition because I think
I intuited what you were going to say.
Yeah. I'm going to put the gauntlet down right now and say I heard this the other day actually. The intellect is a drop. Intuition is the ocean. So we move through the world. Because we're smarty pantses, most of us, I'm not including myself in that. Most of you are smarty pantses. We move through the world thinking we've figured everything out, or not. We figured it out intellectually, or we don't know yet intellectually. And what we forget, especially as creatives, is that the intuition is way more powerful than the intellect. The intuition is the sort of thing that drives everything forward, and we convince ourselves that we drove forward with the intellect. And so intuition is my favorite word in this context because I would like to shine a light on that in this discourse and in our discipline, that I believe in it and I trust it, but we've got to train it. Yeah. And so the question is, how do we train it? That's the hard question.
Okay. What's your least favorite word?
I would say, again, I don't have a least favorite word that I would want to even say in this context, but maybe something like cannot. Like, I would like to think we can do things and we can try things and we can, and so I think there's I came up with an expression for a certain type of individual that is, I probably shouldn't say this, but anyway, it's not a dirty word or anything, but it's a can't-do spirit, and I like the can-do spirit. Like, and you notice this when you're working with let's say you're working with young people. I had an experience when I was working on Archographic, and I had sketched the diagram that I wanted drawn digitally, and I gave it to a student, and we can't do this. There's not enough space to do this. There's not enough this. There's not enough that. And well, just try it. No, it doesn't work. Comes back in a week. Doesn't work. I'm like, listen, here's another diagram. Take a different one. I took the same diagram, handed it to a different student. Yeah, I got this. We got this. And so, cannot to me is a problem. Find a way. And so I'd say cannot is a dirty word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move away from words and go to sounds. What is your favorite sound?
You didn't prep me for that one.
No, I did not.
Favorite sound.
As the Harley goes down Allen Street.
Yeah. God, that's a hard one.
I told you the questions would get harder.
Yeah. Maybe I'll choose the human voice as a sound.
All right, that works.
That was a tough question.
Where did you eat your most memorable meal, and what was it?
Where did I eat my most memorable meal? I should have come to earlier events. Did you have any of these events? I would have known these questions.
I changed some of the questions because I know folks take notes.
My most memorable meal. Good Lord.
Should we come back to that one?
Yeah, let's come back to that.
All right, here's question 5, so we'll come back to question 4. Question 5 is, if you were not an architect, what profession would you pursue?
I would pursue. Can it be a non-profession, like where I'm just like I would just pursue making as many things as I possibly could, making as many, just being involved in making things, whether that's like product design or something like that. I would just want to say let's create something physical in the world.
Okay.
That's what I would do. I don't know if that's a profession. We could create our own profession.
No, the judges will accept that
making
answer.
things profession.
That's fine. All right, your meal, favorite meal. No, not favorite, most memorable meal, which means you have to remember what it was.
The meal or the
Just
company?
Give me the meal.
Could be the company.
It could be let's go with the meal.
The meal.
Yeah.
Maybe these are so hard because, by the way, you all should know that it's very tough to answer this question because there's so many good meals that one has in their lifetime. I think it's maybe Lombardi's Pizza in New York. Just being with a bunch of buddies from undergrad. It was kind of like when we were about to leave. I went to school in New York and we were about to depart, we graduated and we had a big meal at Lombardi's and
celebratory.
Yeah, we were it was just good company, and Lombardi's is always good. I know it's like, I talk to people and they say, it's such a tourist trap and everything. I don't care. It's such a great pizza.
I think you need to type that into Adobe Express and see what kind of images.
Yeah. By the way, I can't believe I just chose pizza as my favorite meal. That tells you a lot about who I am.
Well, it was memorable though.
Yeah, it was memorable.
Let's open it up to the audience. Questions for Frank.
Frank, I was just curious. You're saying that when you were asking the system to generate images, you have to go through several cycles until you get an image that you like. Have you ever tried to ask the system to generate a beautiful image?
That's a good question. No, I have not asked it to generate a beautiful image, but here I can almost guarantee you. I'll do this when I get back to my office, actually.
Challenge accepted.
I can almost guarantee you, I would put, if I had $100 in my pocket, I'd put the whole 100 on the fact that I would not think that image is beautiful that gets kicked out. Yeah. And that's why I do think the tool does, you are the curator. The tool is, those of you, how many of you have used Midjourney in here? So the tool has an aesthetic. I mean, it has a natural aesthetic. And I hate the aesthetic. I hate that natural aesthetic. I shouldn't say hate. I dislike the natural aesthetic. But so you have to eke that out of it over time. But that's a good question. Yeah.
Following on in the same direction and getting back to what you said about prompt crafting, wouldn't it be more appropriate to think in terms of, in these recursive situations, refining the image, of relying more on image-to-image generation rather than text-to-image.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So text, the power or the potential of text-to-image seems to be overstated.
Yeah.
It makes much more sense, I believe, to use image-to-image generation where you try to blend different images or
Yeah.
distort particular images in particular directions.
I 100% agree. If somebody said image crafting, which I think that's a great notion, that's what that's what I think you're doing, is you're using an image as a seed and you're saying, what about that? You're not, by the way, none of this, again, I'll use the word intuition again, none of this is happening overtly intellectually. You're just feeling that's the one, 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 really quick. Like if I'm using it, like if you saw me using the tool, I'm moving as fast as the tool will let me move. I'm not sitting there thinking, now that image has this and here's what I like. It's like that one, that one, that one. And, but it's a craft, but it's, who knows where that comes from. And not that I won't get on a soapbox, I promise, but that issue that idea is fascinating to me because I'm choosing things based on my own intuition. Who knows whether they're good, bad, right, wrong, beautiful, not beautiful, but I 100% trust the decision.
So you don't need to verbalize it. You can
No,
do
I
it
just,
directly between your eye and your brain and the machine.
yeah, and if you and I were like sitting there together with this interface, we'd probably have some battles on that. Like, that's the one. Like let's say it's V1, 2, 3, 4 in the terms of the version. V1's the one. You might say V2. I'll be like, no, Andre, V1 is the one. And then you'd say, well, why is V1 the one? I have no idea why V1's the one. It's just the one, you know. And so I think it's so fascinating to me that that's how something happened to us through the course of our lives that allows us to just be selectors like that, and very quick selectors, non-intellectual selectors. So.
So I'm really get a little concerned because, again, the way I think of architecture is not painting. The way I think of it, you know, you can look at a painting, walk away. Sometimes we have to inhabit the architecture. And many of us don't get to choose that. We are kind of. In that context, just privileging intuition over intellect also has some issues for me. Because if we are only going to depend on our lived experiences and things, which is what I think fools our intuition, unless we think of in a trait kind of thing where as human beings we biologically have some intuition. It's also going to multiply all our inherent biases and things like that. So I'm still trying to process this.
Yeah.
It is to me actually quite alarming if we go down that route because of the world we live in. And not because it's not that we want to become more biased or whatever, but we all have inherent biases wherever we are. And if we just don't question what it is, and we let that, and then Midjourney or DALL-E or whatever, they're being fed everybody's whatever, right? Database. And probably the most dominant ones are going to be the most dominant in different ways.
Yeah, I think I have a few comments. That's one of those questions that we could have a drink and talk about for 2 hours, 3 hours. But I think that when I'm saying intuiting in these tools, I don't mean that we should never use our intellect. I think that the intellect gets in the way during the creative process, and you would generate things and then question the things you generate. If you generate things by constantly questioning, this to me is not a very fluid creative act. And so yes, you always assess. And I think you're also making the assumption that our intellect doesn't include bias, and it does. Like, we can rationalize. I mean, think about all the terrible things that have been rationalized in this world. I mean, we've rationalized the worst things in the world have been very, like to use a sort of this everybody goes to the Nazis immediately. But anyway, Hitler was a very rational human being making very, very bad decisions. And so it's some of it is, I think we have to always reflect and question. And we're like, as architects, we're also engaged with others. So like if I were generating, and I have actually, we're doing a project for this summer, a pavilion designed in AI. The way we work this project is I'll work things in AI, I'll talk to my partner and say, what are we thinking? What do you want to do here? What do you want to do here? I'll generate a bunch of images. Then we'll talk to the client. The client's like, I hate this, I like this, I do it. And then we change things. Then we talk to the fabricator and we're like, well, what can we do here? How do we simplify this and that? So I think the AI tool, all these tools can be used in a bad way, by the way. I mean, all these tools can be used poorly. But I think the way I would prefer, the thing I love about something like MJ is it allows you to operate quickly in this intuitive state. But yeah, you want to use the rational. I think where I may be kind of exaggerating our overemphasis on the rational, because I think we believe in it so strongly, and I don't think as academics we really believe in the intuition. But at the end of the day, someone like Alan Watts would say, how did you make a decision, right? Well, how did you decide? Well, how did you decide to decide? How did you decide to decide to decide? You know, like at some point we just trust and just go forward. And I think it is a process of both intellection and intuition, but the real flow, like I wonder if painters would say this, and or ceramicists would say this. You get in a flow state when you're creating. And that flow state is a non-intellectual state, I would argue. It's like if you're a basketball player like Michael Jordan, extremely smart person, human being, but he's not thinking as he's operating. He's reacting. And if he thinks, the minute he thinks, he's too slow for everybody else around him. And so I think of it like that. Now he is thinking afterwards, well, how did that guy get me? What do I do next time? Like he's rationalizing after. And so I think that's maybe where, like you generate these images, say there's no diversity in these images. What the hell's going on here? And then you can talk about it, write about it, get the companies to try to change it. And so we do need to have that battle. But the thing I love about the tool is that it is a flow state tool. And so
related to that, do you think your intuition would be different from, like, by I mean somebody who's been doing something for a long time?
Yeah.
Versus somebody who's just starting, like a first.
Oh, definitely.
You know.
Definitely. But I had this conversation with people at the conference, and I really do think they're not going to invite me back. I think I was annoying some people, but I said, I went up, and I know, by the way, I know this is too overgeneralized, but I went up to a couple musicians and I said, is there any such thing as good? They said, no. Good music? No, it's subjective, it's contextual. I said, oh, that's good, because that means there's no such thing as bad. And they were like, they were more hesitant to say there's no such thing as bad than they were no such thing as good. And I get it, the cultural argument, like, well, you can be in China and the sounds are different. In India, the sounds are different. Totally get that. But I wonder if there are commonalities that are just human in nature that is a foundational kind of good. Later on in the conversation, expertise came up. And I said to a group, they were talking about, we're artists and creators, and we've developed this expertise over years, and we're training students, et cetera, et cetera. I said, why does expertise matter? There's no such thing as good. What are you training? What are you trying to help people with?
You're just a philosophical troublemaker.
It's all trouble. So I got on that soapbox, and I do understand it's way more complex than what I'm making it out to be. But again, I think these tools are going to bring this up. By the way, the AI tools have already brought up two extremely important things that we almost never talked about.
What's that?
What is thinking and what is creativity? And now we're talking about it because, and I think Malika mentioned this in that meeting, one of our colleagues said to me, the thing I hate about AI tools is it just simply takes all this work in the world, hybridizes it into new forms. And I said, well, what do you think our brain does? Like, do you think these things come out of nowhere?
That's
like
right.
we make a building like, do we have that much hubris that we think we invented this out of thin air?
Right,
Like,
right.
this is what we do. We copy, we mimic, we imitate. This is why it's important to hang around good people, because you're adapting their kind of belief systems and stuff like that. So, and we haven't thought about thinking as much, but thinking is, these things are going to be foregrounded by these tools, because we now have to say, what is the intellect?
That's it.
What is thinking? What is creating? And that's going to be a pretty cool place for our college.
Oh, I agree.
You know, what's creativity is a big question. So,
Absolutely. Well, Frank, this has been a really great conversation.
It's been fun.
You have taken us to places that we might not have been able to generate without the help of AI, or at least a conversation about
Yeah.
AI. So thanks.
You're welcome.
You've reminded me of so many references that I hadn't thought about for a while. Csikszentmihalyi and flow, or aesthetics and Goodman's theories there, or Suzanne Langer's work, work of Howard Gardner and others dealing with cognition and creativity. Thanks so much for the work that you're
My
doing,
pleasure.
and I really appreciate that you're willing to sit down and talk about this book and this work that you're doing, because it suggests that we're about the creation of not only images and new work, but it's about new ideas.
Yeah.
And so thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Frank
Yeah.
Jacobus. All right. We also want to thank the Office of Research, Creative Activity, and Graduate Studies. Thank you for hosting this latest example of a book conversation. And there'll be more to come. So thanks, tech crew in the back. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. We have some beverages and some nibblies, and take on these conversations as we continue into the evening. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.